The challenge with budget timelines tends to be that departments wait until right before the final deadline to share their inputs with the finance team. That's because they prioritize their own tasks until the very last moment. That results in little time for review and discussion, which means finance has a hard time adding value by challenging inputs. Additionally, it compresses the timeline for creating consolidated financials and decks. So let's take a look at the best practices for setting budget timelines to prevent this and other issues. So let's take a look at the three core tenets of budget timelines. First, you want to make sure to start early and plan ahead. So you want to have enough time for thorough planning and consideration. And a common approach is to start as far as 3 to 6 months before the beginning of the next fiscal year. How early you should start depends on the size of the company and the complexity of your business. Large multinational companies start in August and September, where the fiscal year ends by the end of December. But smaller companies can get the entire budgeting process done within 1 or 2 months as well. Important piece here is to start to plan early and make sure you have everything lined up so the process runs smoothly. Then it's important to set clear deadlines and milestones. So the deadlines need to be firm, meaning you get people's buy-in that they understand why the deadlines are there and why they are no miss deadline. And you want to separate between initial submissions, revisions, and the final approvals. And each of these should have a bit buffer because anyone who has done a budgeting process before knows that delays can happen easily and things can take longer than you have originally planned. So planning for those delays ahead of time by adding a day or two buffer can make a big difference. And you want to make sure to involve key stakeholders early because their leadership is crucial for setting realistic and achievable budget timelines. Ideally, ask people before you share it what they think about it, get their input, and start the collaborative aspect of budgeting even before you share the budget timeline. And a common issue is that department heads share their inputs at the very last moment. So here's a way that I found helps significantly with addressing that. And that's implementing a staggered timeline. Because the thing is, people, when they have a lot on their plate and they struggle with prioritizing the budget tasks, they prioritize according to the deadline. Because a deadline essentially makes it easier for people to prioritize because you're very clear about when you need things. And then deadlines create urgency, and urgency is another important driver for prioritization. And staggered means that you have multiple checkpoints, multiple times where you're asking for inputs rather than waiting until the very last moment. Make sure the work is more manageable. It's being completed progressively rather than all at once. Sometimes also delays occur simply because people don't understand part of the process, or they don't understand where to get their inputs from, or they're unsure in which way you require the inputs. And it's important that you clarify that upfront. I mentioned this before. The best process is to ask people to explain how they understood the process and the deadlines back to you, because then you can quickly identify where there are gaps in the understanding. Regular reminders and check-ins are important as well, especially as the deadlines approach. Sometimes people are concerned that sending a reminder a day before the deadline is annoying people or is too intrusive. But actually, most of the time, even very senior leaders are happy about the reminder because that helps them make sure that they don't forget and that they get the work done on time. And it also shows that the deadline is important for you and makes it likelier that it doesn't get ignored. Incentives and consequences can help as well. Consequences, so that's something that should be used sparingly because it can hurt the relationship as well. But you can set up consequences not in the sense of people get punished or get a worse rating or get called out when they don't stick to the budget timeline, but you can share the consequences that a late submission has for the business as a whole and how one manager's late submission brings the entire budget process to a halt because you can't continue, you can't consolidate until you have all the information. Technology can help significantly also in getting input sooner because with budgeting software, you don't have to email files around and consolidate them. People can enter the number in a dashboard in the cloud, and you immediately get alerted that the inputs are there, and then you can see how they impact the total picture right away. As a last resort, if people are just completely ignoring your deadlines, you can involve senior management as well. In other words, escalate it. But I would definitely advise that this is being used as a last resort because, this can definitely negatively impact your professional relationships. There are also ways you can facilitate communication and make it easier for people to communicate. One specific way that you can do this, for example, is to have office hours where once or twice a week you reserve an hour where people can come to you, they can call into a Zoom call or walk over to your desk and share any questions they may have about the budget. Because the thing is, sometimes people don't ask you questions because they think you're incredibly busy, think the question isn't that important. But if you give them the space by having these office hours, it's much more likely that people actually take you up on it. And that gives you an opportunity to help them help you. But in the end, it all comes down to strong work relationships. The more people trust that you have the best interest in mind, the more they trust that you know what you're doing, that you're an expert in what you do, and that the work that you're doing together with the budget will help the company move forward, the more likely they are to invest time and effort into the exercise. We'll talk about building relationships in depth in the business partnering module.